Mark Levin leaned into his mic, his voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Frankly," he said, his tone dripping with disdain, "I don't know how someone with a law degree like yours even made it here." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen above notepads. A collective gasp broke the stillness. Some froze mid-breath, wide-eyed and stunned. Others exchanged smirks, as though watching a drama they had secretly hoped would unfold. All eyes darted toward Jasmine Crockett. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She sat perfectly still, calm, unreadable, exuding a silent power that made the insult feel small. Her hands rested lightly on the desk, but there was something in her gaze, something steady and unshaken, that made the room shift without her saying a word. The cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of expression, every beat of anticipation hanging in the air. The entire chamber leaned forward, waiting for the explosion they were certain was coming. A voiceover cuts in, low and deliberate. When Mark Levin crossed the line, nobody expected what happened next. Nobody expected Jasmine Crockett's response to shift the entire tone of the room. Levin straightened in his chair, confident, convinced he had the upper hand. But what came next, the moment she opened her mouth, would leave everyone in that chamber silent, stunned, and forever. Changed, to be continued. The chamber was still buzzing, whispers darting back and forth like electricity. But beneath the murmurs was something heavier, a sense that this wasn't just another heated exchange. This was bigger. Mark Levin wasn't just anyone in that room. He was a veteran conservative firebrand, a commentator with decades of influence, known for his sharp takedowns and relentless aggression. People expected him to dominate. They always did. He built his reputation on pushing opponents off balance, turning quiet hearings into spectacles, and walking away looking untouchable. But across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, a rising progressive, force whose story was nothing like Levin's. Where he had walked a smooth path paved with privilege and media power, she had clawed her way here, step by step, fight by fight. Her law degree wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof of battles won, nights spent studying under dim lights, doors slammed in her face, and ceilings shattered along the way. So when Levin took aim at her credentials, it wasn't just a professional slight. It was personal. It was an attack on her journey, her identity, her right to sit at that table, and for millions watching, on everyone who'd ever had to fight twice as hard to prove they belonged. Outside the chamber, Twitter timelines were already heating up. Livestream viewers were clipping Levin's insult, reactions pouring in. Did he just question her degree? Crockett better give it back to him, hard. This is about to get wild. Inside, Crockett sat silent, letting the storm swell around her. But her silence wasn't retreat. It was precision. Every second she waited, the anticipation deepened, the tension stretched like wire about to snap. The narrator's voice cuts in, measured but charged. Everyone expected Crockett to fumble, to stumble under Levin's weight, to shrink beneath his attack. But instead she was loading ammunition, facts, fire and composure sharpened to perfection. Even Levin could feel it now, though he wouldn't admit it. He leaned back in his chair, confident on the surface, but his eyes darted, searching for cracks in her armor that weren't there. He'd expected outrage, defensiveness, maybe even silence. But Crockett was doing something far more dangerous. She was waiting. The audience watching from home leaned in, phones clutched tight, holding their breath without realizing it. You could feel it through the live stream, this collective sense that something was building, something inevitable. And that's when the narrator returns, soft but rising, pulling viewers deeper into the moment. Because what happened next didn't just shift the energy in that hearing. It lit a fuse that would explode across the country. Her next words wouldn't just defend her name, they would redefine it. In the chamber, Crocket finally moved. Just a slight lean forward, just enough to let everyone know she was ready. Her fingers brushed the edge of her papers, steady, controlled. A quiet calm settled over her, the kind that comes right before the lightning strike. Levin glanced at her, still sure he'd forced her into a corner. But the truth was, he'd just walked into one himself, and as the cameras locked onto her face and the microphones caught the faint sound of her breath before she spoke, the world leaned closer to its screens, because the next thing Jasmine Crockett was about to say would change everything. Before that explosive moment in the chamber, long before the gasps and frozen stares, there was already a story building, the story of Mark Levin. To understand why his insult carried so much weight, you have to understand the man behind it. For years, Levin had cultivated an image, sharp, relentless, unshakably confident. To his supporters, he was a fearless truth-teller, the guy who never flinched, never apologized, and never lost. To his critics, he was something else entirely. A ruthless instigator, a man who thrived on confrontation, weaponizing his platform to dominate anyone who dared to oppose him. His voice, loud and unyielding, had become a fixture of conservative media. As a best-selling author, syndicated radio host, and television personality, Levin didn't just influence audiences, he commanded them. He had a gift for framing his opponents as weak, uninformed, or undeserving, and millions tuned in to watch him do it. In an era where outrage drives clicks, Levin mastered the art of using words like daggers, drawing blood without leaving a mark. Over the years, he'd left a trail of headline-making confrontations. In one infamous broadcast, he dressed down a sitting senator, cutting off their responses with sarcastic jabs until they visibly stumbled, unable to regain footing. In another, he openly mocked a young progressive advocate live on air, dismissing her points as emotional tantrums and reducing her arguments to sound bites for his audience's amusement. This was Levin's formula: overwhelm, dominate, humiliate. He understood something fundamental about televised debates. Perception often matters more than facts. A loud, confident voice paired with relentless interruptions can make a victor out of someone who isn't even winning the argument. And for years, it worked. Levin wore his reputation like armor. Opponents braced themselves, knowing that when they faced him, they weren't just walking into a discussion, they were stepping onto his battlefield. His ability to rattle even seasoned lawmakers was legendary. Colleagues often whispered about his psychological warfare tactics, how he'd throw unexpected barbs, twist narratives mid-debate, and force people off balance before they even realized what had happened. And that's why, on this day, in this room, when Levin launched his insult at Jasmine Crockett, most people assumed the outcome was predetermined. He'd done this before, dozens of times, maybe hundreds, and he almost always walked away with the narrative on his side. But there was one thing Levin didn't count on. Crockett wasn't like his past opponents, where others folded under pressure. Crockett absorbed it. Where others met arrogance with anger, she met it with silence, the kind that unnerves, the kind that makes even the loudest voices stumble. While Levin thrived on chaos, Crockett understood the power of composure. Still, Levin couldn't see, and he believed, as he always had, that his words alone could break someone's foundation. And so he doubled down, leaning into the attack, convinced that dismissing her credentials would not only discredit Crockett, but diminish her very presence in that room. To him, questioning her law degree wasn't just an insult. It was a weapon, a way to undermine her legitimacy, to remind everyone watching who held power and who didn't. But in trying to belittle her journey, Levin misread the moment entirely. Because for Crockett, this wasn't just another hearing, and it wasn't just another debate. This was about more than personal dignity. It was about representation, identity, and the millions watching who saw themselves in her struggle. And that's what Levin failed to understand. In his world, victory was measured by sound bites, by applause lines, by dominance in the moment. But Crockett wasn't playing his game. She was playing the long one. The narrator's voice drops lower, carrying the weight of inevitability. Levin had built his reputation on dismantling opponents, turning them into cautionary tales and trophies of his triumph. But this time, he miscalculated his target. Because in just a few moments, the woman he underestimated would deliver a response so sharp, so commanding, that it would flip the room, silence his supporters, and ignite a movement far beyond the walls of that chamber. What Levin thought would be another easy victory was about to become the turning point of his career, and he didn't even know it yet. Long before she stepped into that hearing room, before the cameras, before the clash with Mark Levin, Jasmine Crockett's story had already begun. A story rooted in resilience, sacrifice, and an unrelenting fight to be heard. Born in Dallas, Texas, Jasmine didn't come from wealth or privilege. She grew up in a world where opportunities weren't handed out. They had to be fought for. Her childhood was shaped by watching hard-working parents juggle multiple jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. In those early years, she learned two things that would define her. Nothing worth having comes easy, and dignity must be defended. School wasn't just about grades, it was survival. She wasn't the loudest voice in the classroom, but she was the most determined. She carried the weight of expectations, not just her own, but those of a community that looked at her and silently prayed she'd become someone who could break barriers they'd been told were unbreakable. When Jasmine decided to pursue law, it wasn't about prestige. It wasn't about titles or power. It was personal. She had seen too many families silenced in courtrooms where justice wasn't blind, where it leaned heavily against those who couldn't afford representation, those whose voices didn't carry weight in halls of power. She wanted to change that. But the journey wasn't simple. Law school meant long nights, endless reading, and the gnawing pressure of knowing that failure wasn't an option. She worked multiple jobs to pay her tuition, often going without sleep, often questioning if the struggle was worth it. And yet, she kept going. Because for Jasmine, becoming a lawyer wasn't just about entering a profession. It was about creating a weapon for justice. It was about taking her own experiences, her frustrations, her sense of injustice, and turning them into something powerful enough to fight back. Her path through the legal world wasn't paved with red carpets. It was carved out of resistance. She defended people no one else would, fought for clients who couldn't afford fancy attorneys, and stood in courtrooms where judges doubted her before she even opened her mouth. She walked into spaces where people looked past her, until she made sure they couldn't. Jasmine Crockett became known for her relentless energy and sharp, commanding presence. But what made her different wasn't just her skill. It was her heart. Her cases weren't numbers. They were people. Families fighting to keep their homes, mothers trying to reunite with their children, young men wrongfully accused, staring down decades in prison. Every win mattered, but every loss cut deep. And yet, she never stopped. That drive carried her into politics, where she became a rising progressive voice, fearless, unapologetic, and committed to giving a platform to those who'd been ignored for too long. While critics labeled her too outspoken, her supporters saw something else: authenticity. She didn't play by the quiet rules of Washington. She spoke directly, truthfully, and without compromise. By the time she entered that hearing room, Jasmine Crockett had fought her way through every barrier designed to keep someone like her out. And yet here she was, sitting across from Mark Levin, her very presence in that seat representing more than just herself. She carried with her the weight of every young woman told she wasn't good enough, every first-generation college student told they didn't belong, every immigrant child who watched their parents struggle just to be seen. So when Levin questioned her law degree, when he reduced years of sacrifice into a single dismissive insult, he wasn't just questioning Jasmine Crockett. He was questioning the journeys of millions who'd walked uphill against impossible odds. And that's why this moment mattered. Because for Jasmine, Her law degree wasn't just a credential. It was a battle won, a symbol of survival, resilience, and everything she'd endured to get here. It wasn't a paper hanging on a wall. It was nights spent awake with a single desk lamp on. It was tears she never let anyone see. It was the quiet victory she carried long before the world noticed her. The audience watching from home didn't just see a lawmaker under attack. They saw themselves in her. They saw their own parents working overtime, their own dreams doubted, their own identities challenged. They leaned forward, waiting, not just for her to respond, but for her to win. Because in that room, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just defending her name. She was defending everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in a space they earned, and as she sat there perfectly still, eyes locked on Levin, the silence wasn't weakness. It was power. It was control. It was a woman gathering the weight of her story, her battles, and her victories into a single, unshakable moment. The world was about to see something Levin had never faced before. Someone who couldn't be intimidated. Someone whose strength wasn't in volume, but in conviction. And when she finally spoke, it wouldn't just be a response. It would be a reckoning, because the storm that Mark Levin thought he unleashed, Jasmine Crockett was about to turn it back on him, and the aftershocks would travel far beyond those chamber walls. The room was heavy with tension, like the air before a summer storm. All eyes were locked on the two figures at the center of the battlefield. Mark Levin, leaning forward with the swagger of a man convinced of his dominance, and Jasmine Crockett, sitting poised, calm, and unreadable. Levin's voice cut through the silence, sharp and deliberate. "People like you diminish the credibility of this entire institution." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The audacity of the statement wasn't just in its content, but in its intent. Levin wasn't attacking Crockett's arguments. He was attacking her existence in that seat, her identity, her journey, her right to be there. Some lawmakers shifted uncomfortably. Others smirked as if savoring the moment. The cameras zoomed in. Millions were watching online, waiting to see if Crockett would falter, if the weight of Levin's aggression would finally push her over the edge. But she didn't move. Crockett sat still, her hands folded, her expression neutral, not passive, not indifferent, but calculating. Every second of silence she allowed was deliberate. Levin thought he was landing blows, but Crockett was studying his rhythm, measuring his strikes, preparing her counterattack. Levin pressed harder, sensing blood in the water. He waved his hand dismissively. "Frankly, it's embarrassing. We're supposed to uphold standards here." And yet, he stopped mid-sentence, realizing she wasn't reacting. No interruptions, no visible frustration, no verbal retaliation. That silence unnerved him more than any rebuttal could have. Whispers broke. Out across the room. "Is she going to take this?" "No way she lets that slide. She's got something coming." Crockett inhaled slowly, her gaze steady, unblinking. Inside, her heartbeat was steady. Years of courtroom battles had trained her for moments like this. To her, this wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about proving, once again, that she belonged. Levin kept talking, throwing jab after jab, hoping to force a mistake. But the balance of power was shifting. The longer Crockett stayed silent, the more control she regained. Levin didn't notice, but the audience did. Online chats exploded. Tweets flooded timelines. "Why is she so calm? She's plotting something. This silence is terrifying. Levin better watch out." I can feel a clapback coming. And then, with the faintest flicker of a smile, Crockett leaned slightly forward. The entire room leaned with her, every camera adjusted. Every reporter's pen hovered. The suspense was suffocating. But Crockett didn't speak. Not yet. She let the moment stretch until it became unbearable, until Levin's confidence began to fray at the edges. The hearing room wasn't Levin's anymore. It was hers. And when she finally opened her mouth, her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was controlled, razor-sharp, and chillingly precise. What she said next would flip the entire debate on its head, because Crocket wasn't just responding. She was about to dismantle him, piece by piece, and nobody in that room was ready for what was coming. Her next move wasn't just unexpected, it was surgical. The silence inside the chamber was deafening. Everyone had been waiting for it. The breaking point, the explosion, the moment Jasmine Crockett would finally snap back. Levin sat there, leaning back in his chair with smug confidence, his smirk practically daring her to try. The cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing every ounce of arrogance. He believed he had won. He thought Crockett's silence was surrender. But then, Crocket moved. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned forward, not with aggression, but with calm authority. Her fingertips pressed gently against the polished wooden table as she locked her eyes on Levin. No notes, no hesitation, no fear, and in one breath, she delivered the first strike. "Mr. Levin," she began, her tone steady, unwavering, and sharp as glass. "The difference between us isn't the degree on the wall. It's the principles behind it." The room froze. For a moment, you could almost hear the electricity buzzing in the lights overhead. Some lawmakers' jaws dropped. Others raised their eyebrows in disbelief. Reporters stopped typing mid-sentence. A few in the audience gasped audibly, hands covering their mouths, and then a slow, scattered ripple of applause began at the back of the room. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was growing. A few people nodded at each other, almost whispering. She just flipped the entire conversation. Levin blinked, once, twice, his smirk faltering for the first time all day. He straightened in his chair, shifting slightly, the confidence on his face beginning to crack. But Crocket wasn't finished. The counterattack begins. "See, Mr. Levin," she continued, leaning in just a little more. "I didn't come here to defend my diploma, my intelligence, or my seat at this table. I came here to defend the people I represent. The difference is, I believe this institution should serve them. You seem more interested in serving yourself." A loud murmur swept through the hearing room. Levin opened his mouth to respond, but Crocket raised her hand slightly, a subtle, powerful motion that commanded silence. She wasn't done. "You want to question my credentials? Fine. Let's talk facts. I worked twice as hard to earn my law degree, and unlike you, I didn't inherit my platform. I built it, brick by brick, case by case, day by day. And while you've spent years using your influence to tear people down, I've spent mine fighting to lift people up." Gasps filled the chamber. A few audience members clapped again, louder this time. One reporter whispered under his breath, This is going viral. Social media erupts. Almost instantly, Twitter exploded. Policy Watch, 247. Jasmine Crockett just ended Mark Levin in one sentence. Mic drop moment. Courtroom queen. I have chills. Crockett. It's not the degree. It's the principles. Legendary. Breaking politics. Liv look at Levin realizing he's done. Clips of the moment spread like wildfire. Within minutes, Team Crocket and Levin Meltdown were both trending worldwide. The receipts come out, and then Crocket shifted gears. She didn't just defend herself. She went on the offensive. "You've spent this entire hearing questioning my credibility, but let's examine yours, Mr. Levin." The room went silent again. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of tension. Crocket calmly slid a printed document across the table. "According to public records," she said, tapping the paper, "you've made statements contradicting your own positions. Not once, not twice, but over a dozen times in the last 3 years. One day, you're against government overreach. The next, you defend policies that expand it. Which version of Mark Levin are we supposed to believe today?" Levin shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened. He glanced briefly toward his aides, but they avoided his gaze. The whispers in the audience grew louder. She came prepared. He didn't see this coming. "This is brutal," the room tilt's Levin tried to interrupt. "Now wait just a—" But Crocket didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calmness was the power. "No, Mr. Levin. You've had the floor. Now it's my turn." The applause erupted again, louder, stronger. It was no longer scattered. The entire left side of the room was on its feet, clapping and cheering. For the first time all day, Levin looked small. The build-up to the climax Crocket paused, letting the energy build around her. The audience leaned forward in anticipation. The tension was suffocating and yet somehow exhilarating. "Let me make this plain," she said softly, but her voice carried like a drumbeat. "This isn't about your law degree or mine. It isn't about your ego or mine. It's about truth. It's about service. It's about the people who sent us here to work for them. Not for ourselves, not for headlines, and certainly not for personal vendettas." A hush fell over the room again. Levin stared at her, his jaw clenched, but his silence said more than words ever could. And then Crocket delivered the blow that would turn this moment into history. The final line. The mic. Dropped, she leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and looked Levin dead in the eye. Her voice, low and cutting, carried across every corner of the chamber. "You tried to discredit me today, Mr. Levin, but all you did was expose yourself." For a fraction of a second, there was complete silence. Not a breath. Not a whisper. The weight of her words hung in the air like thunder. And then the room erupted. Reporters jumped to their feet. The audience broke into thunderous applause. Gasps mixed with cheers. People were standing on chairs, clapping, recording, shouting. On social media, the clip hit 1 million views in under 5 minutes. Levin sat frozen, his face drained of color. His hands clasped tightly in front of him. The man who had walked into the room brimming with confidence now stared at the table, saying nothing. Crocket, meanwhile, leaned back, calm as ever. Not a hair out of place. Not a hint of a smile. Just quiet strength. It wasn't just a win. It was domination. And when she delivered her final line, the entire room exploded, in shock, in applause, in awe. The hearing room hasn't even emptied yet, but outside, the internet is on fire. Phones are up, tweets are flying, screenshots, clips, reactions. Everything hits at once. Twitter explodes. The moment Jasmine Crockett delivered her mic drop counterattack, Twitter instantly erupted. Within minutes, hashtags like Free, Crocket Clapback, Levin Shutdown, and Justice Served started trending worldwide. Scrolling timelines looked like a battlefield of memes and reactions. Policy Nerd 87. Jasmine Crockett just made history. This is how you dismantle arrogance with facts. Crocket Clapback. The real debater. Mark Levin just got cooked on live TV, and the replay's even better the second time. Truth Matters, 24. Somebody framed that moment. Crockett's calmness, Levin's chaos, iconic. It wasn't just political junkies talking. Celebrities, influencers, and everyday viewers were posting nonstop. Within an hour, Crockett's clip racked up 12 million views across X, Instagram, and TikTok. Breaking news. Headlines mainstream media picked it up almost instantly. Notifications started popping up everywhere. CNN, Jasmine Crockett silences Mark Levin in fiery exchange. Internet loses it. The Washington Post, the moment that stunned Congress. Crockett's calm fury goes viral. Fox News, Levin faces online backlash after heated clash with Crockett. BuzzFeed News, 15 reactions to Jasmine Crockett's viral mic drop moment you need to see. The country was divided, but engaged. News networks broke into regular programming to replay the exchange in full. Analysts dissected her choice of words, her composure, and the sheer surgical precision of her counterattack. Talk shows and commentary explode by evening. Crockett's response became the opening segment on nearly every political talk show. On MSNBC, a commentator declared, "This wasn't just a rebuttal. This was a masterclass in how to hold power accountable. Meanwhile, on Fox, Levin's allies rushed to defend him. But even there, one analyst admitted, look, Levin came in swinging, but Crocket landed the knockout punch. Podcasts, YouTube streams, and late-night hosts jumped on it too. Jimmy Kimmel replayed the moment, pausing for laughs. You can actually pinpoint the second Mark Levin realized he messed up. The crowd roared. TikTok and meme culture. Take over TikTok became the epicenter of creativity. Within hours, thousands of creators remixed the moment into memes, animations, and cinematic edits. One viral video paired Crockett's Clapback with dramatic orchestra music and captioned it, "When you've been waiting your whole career for this moment." Another TikTok stitched Levin's insult, followed by Thanos dusting away, racking up 2.7 million likes overnight. Gen Z wasn't just watching. They were owning the narrative. Crocket became a symbol of calm defiance. Celebrities and politicians react high-profile figures across politics and entertainment couldn't resist weighing in. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. Jasmine Crockett showed grace and fire. That's how it's done. Viola Davis. This is an acting clinic in composure. Bravo, Jasmine. Trevor Noah. Mark Levin underestimated his opponent. Huge mistake. Even President Biden was reportedly briefed on the viral moment. A senior aide was overheard saying, "We haven't seen a congressional exchange blow up this fast in years." The ripple effect nationwide, this wasn't just another political clip. It became a cultural flashpoint. Across coffee shops, classrooms, and workplaces, people debated law, justice, gender, and representation. For young law students, Crockett's takedown was inspirational fuel. One student tweeted, "Just printed Jasmine Crockett's line and pinned it above my desk. That's the energy I need." Meanwhile, conservative pundits accused Crockett of grandstanding. But even critics admitted she dominated the exchange. Cinematic closing. Beat back in the hearing room, hours later, silence still lingered. Levin sat motionless, scrolling through his buzzing phone. Crocket, meanwhile, walked out. Quietly, no gloating, no theatrics. Just calm, measured confidence. And outside, the world had already crowned the moment historic. The voiceover fades out with one final line. One insult. One clapback. One viral moment that reshaped the conversation and left Mark Levin's legacy rattled. The chamber was quiet now, but the echoes of that moment lingered far beyond its walls. Jasmine Crockett had walked out, calm and composed, leaving behind a stunned audience and a viral moment that would dominate headlines for days. Yet the true significance wasn't just in the exchange itself. It was in what it represented. This was more than a battle between two individuals. It was a microcosm of larger struggles, the fight for respect, the struggle for dignity, and the ongoing demand for representation. Crockett's response reminded everyone watching that presence, patience, and principle often carry far more weight than volume or aggression. The moral of the story wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about how one chooses to confront challenges when the stakes are high, when the voices around you are loud, dismissive, or outright hostile. For Crockett, the path had been long, a journey built on persistence, education, and the unwavering belief that truth and fairness matter more than applause or intimidation. Sometimes, a narrator reflects, the loudest voice in the room isn't the strongest, it's the calmest. Crockett embodied that principle. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to attack with fury. She spoke with precision, with clarity, with the kind of moral authority that comes from lived experience, from hard-fought battles, and from a commitment to serve others rather than oneself. The audience watching, both in the chamber and across screens worldwide, understood the deeper truth. This was about more than politics. It was about the values that define a person: integrity, courage, and the quiet strength to stand firm in the face of arrogance. Her victory wasn't only personal, It resonated with anyone who had ever been questioned, dismissed, or doubted. It sent a message to young professionals, students, immigrants, and advocates alike. Your worth isn't determined by what others try to diminish. It's defined by how you rise. Crockett's composure became a blueprint. Her calm, deliberate response was a reminder that dignity and strategy often outperform bluster and intimidation. The applause, the viral clips, the headlines, they were all secondary. The real triumph was in the example she set, showing that respect and steadfastness could cut through noise and reshape narratives. As the chamber emptied and social media continued to buzz, the story settled into something larger, a reflection on how society values power, voice, and action. It highlighted that true influence doesn't come from silencing others. It comes from standing firmly in one's principles and elevating the conversation. The final takeaway was clear, resonant, and universal. When faced with attempts to diminish your identity, your work, or your worth, the measure of strength isn't in retaliating with anger. It's in rising with integrity. In that sense, Crockett's moment was not just a political triumph. It was a human one. A reminder that courage manifests not in the loudest rebuttal, but in the clarity of purpose, the quiet confidence of conviction, and the unshakable commitment to uphold what's right. And for everyone watching, from the backbenches of Congress to the smallest screens in homes across the nation, the lesson lingered. Strength is calm, power is measured, and dignity, above all, prevails. Jasmine Crockett's moment wasn't just a victory in a hearing room. It was a statement to the world. She showed that composure, courage, and conviction can overcome arrogance and intimidation. Her calm yet powerful response to Mark Levin reminded everyone watching that true strength isn't measured by how loudly you speak, but by how firmly you stand in your principles. This wasn't about politics alone. It was about respect, dignity, and the courage to represent what you believe in, even when someone tries to undermine you. Crockett's victory became a symbol for anyone who's ever faced doubt, dismissal, or disrespect. It proved that when you stand tall, speak your truth, and act with integrity, you not only defend yourself but inspire countless others to do the same. And now, it's your turn to carry that lesson forward. Whether in your personal life, your workplace, or your community, moments like this remind us all to uphold our values, defend our dignity, and rise above attempts to diminish us. If you believe in standing your ground, in speaking truth with clarity, and in celebrating courage and justice, share this moment. Let others see that composure and principle can change the course of a conversation, and sometimes, even the world. Subscribe to stay connected with stories that inspire, empower, and highlight voices that matter. Comment below with your thoughts, share this video with friends and family, and join a movement that celebrates strength, justice, and courage. Because moments like Jasmine Crockett's aren't just history. They're a reminder that dignity always triumphs, and that every one of us has the power to stand strong when it matters most.